is a series of district, school, and community-based events centered around environmental challenges and solutions. Today, we will be hearing from climate activist and author Harriet Shugarman. She will be introduced by two outstanding students. We have Nadia Chasalow and Olivia Kim. Nadia is a senior here at CHS. She's a leader of the Yes Club and one of the organizers of Green Week. Olivia is also a senior. She's also a member of the Yes Club, and she designed the Green Week logo that you've seen on posters around the school and in the community. Let's have a round of applause for Nadia and Olivia.
Okay, Harriet Shugarman is the 2021 Water Spirit Suzanne Golis Awardee, a 2020 New York City Climate Hero, and a 2019 featured speaker at the Global Engagement Summit at United Nations headquarters. Ms. Shugarman is the executive director and founder of Climate Mama, an online community launched in 2009 that reaches individuals in over 110 countries and all 50 states. She is a connector in the climate movement. As a leader and mentor with the Climate Reality Project, Ms. Shugarman established the Climate Reality New York City Metro chapter and served as its first chair. She was the recipient of the prestigious Climate Reality Alfredo Circus Memorial Green Ring Award in 2017 and is also profiled in former US Vice President Al Gore's book, An Inconvenient Sequel, Truth to Power.
Harriet Shugarman's writing and thought pieces on climate solutions appear in international, national, and regional publications, and she is a regular on podcasts and radio around the country. Ms. Shugarman's 2020 book, How to Talk to Your Kids About Climate Change, Turning Angst to Action, has garnered 3 National Book Awards. Ms. Shugarman has worked for more than 25 years with governments, international organizations, and educational institutions on climate and sustainability issues as an economist, policy analyst, and educator, including 13 years with the International Monetary Fund as representative of the IMF at the United Nations. Ms. Shugarman is a professor of climate change and society and world sustainability at Ramapo College of New Jersey and sits on and advises numerous national boards that address climate, public policy, youth, gender, families, and justice. She is a senior advisor with Our Kids Climate, an international coalition of parent organizations. She lives in New York City.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the kind introduction. Thank you all for having me here. Happy Earth Week. I am so glad to get to spend part of it here with all of you. I've been telling people actually all week I've been doing talks in different places, often from my computer, but around the country, and I highlight your school, your district, and the teachers that I've met here, and the amazing programs that you do in helping young people understand the climate crisis. And I hope, my book is called How to Talk to Your Kids About the Climate Crisis, Turning Angst into Action. I hope that when you leave here, when you leave from your studies, you have ideas on how to talk to your parents or other people in your lives that may not be learning in the same way that you are all of the important things that we need to understand on the reality of the climate crisis, and then what we can do about it. And many of those things I know that you're talking about in your classes, and I am going to share some of them with you here today. So I want to say, if you don't remember anything else, and I think these are things that you probably already know, but these are 5 simple sentences and 10 simple words. And this was basically the summary from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recent report. Has anybody heard of that or heard of the IPCC? Just raise your hand. A couple, actually more than a few. I think more than my college students in my class yesterday. But it is a body that was created in 1988, and it reports to the United Nations on the state of the climate globally. And it's made up of climate scientists from all around the world. And right now we're in the 6th assessment. So it's the 6th time since 1988 that it's reported. And it takes 5 to 6 years for these reports to come together. And we had the first working group report that came out in August, one in on February 28th, and then one at the beginning of this month, on April 4th. And I'm going to share a little bit about those with you. But these 5 sentences are also part of something that the Yale Climate Communications group puts together, and this is it with the climate crisis, right? Scientists all agree it's real, it's us, it's bad, but there's hope. And that window of hope in terms of what we can do, continues as we don't do a lot of things to get, that much narrower. But the reality is there's many things that we can do to slow down the climate crisis. This is something that we're going to be living with for the rest of our lives. It's something we need to get comfortable with in a very uncomfortable way, perhaps, but it is something that we can slow down and live with as we live with chronic illnesses or problems and live with them. And that's what we need to do, and we need to recognize that there are many things that we can do. So just a quick look at some of this is from the August working group report, so 3 of 4 reports that have come out this year. And you can imagine, right? Here are these scientists from all over the world. They work, they put together their peer-reviewed data, but then their reports goes to governments, and it's at the United Nations. I spent 13 years working at the UN, and let me tell you, it's hard to get agreement, and then when you do, you have to really negotiate. And I would be up late at night with governments. We'd be fighting about an and or a but or an or, because how you say something really matters. So for the IPCC report to say that it's unequivocal that human influence has warmed the atmosphere, oceans, and land is a big deal. It might not seem like it because we know that's the reality, but they've been very careful in their language. So every word is negotiated and looked at carefully. This was the February 28th working group report that came out, and this was the last sentence, the last paragraph of the summary report to policymakers. So these reports are thousands of pages long. You can find them on the IPCC website, but just have a look at that last sentence. Any further delay will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. Right? They're not pulling any punches, these scientists, right? They're telling it like it is, and they are not working in advertising. They're not used to public speaking, many of them. They're not activists. They do science, right? And they do climate science. And this same time that this report came out, there was a cover story in the New York Times, and it was a story about some of these climate scientists who say, should we do another report? We keep saying what's happening, and people aren't paying attention. So we need to pay attention, and I know that you're all paying attention, and thank you for paying attention here as I'm sharing this with you, but I know that you're probably farther ahead than many people because you're learning about the reality of what's happening in school. And then and this is something that I talk about in my book, but I really believe this. I know some of you are graduating this year and going on to college and or directly into the workforce, whatever you're passionate about. If you remember the climate crisis and look at it, through that lens, we need you. We need musicians. We need artists. We need carpenters. We need builders. We need teachers, more teachers. We need doctors. We need everyone that understands what we're going through, and then together we can accomplish a lot. So I want to just take us a step back for a minute, and I know that, again, most of you have learned many of these things, but just as you're talking to your parents or your aunt or your Uncle Bob, who's the one that, says it's not really that bad, it's not really that serious, it's happened before, these are just some really basic premises, ideas about what's really happening, right? Here's our planet. This photograph was taken Christmas Eve, 1968. It was taken by the first Apollo mission that left the near Earth orbit, and it was our first time, us living on the planet, that we saw ourselves in outer space. And we're celebrating Earth Day tomorrow, and the first Earth Day happened 2 years after this photograph. And this photograph actually is one of the things that helped push that Earth Day forward and really galvanized people. Within 2 years of this photograph, we had the Environmental Protection Agency was established, so we didn't have a federal body that looked at environmental issues. That was established under President Nixon, as was the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. And those are policies that we're still using and working with today, more than 50 years later. So, when you're reminding those in your life, what's causing our planet to warm up. This is a picture of the sun rising through our Earth's atmosphere. And Carl Sagan described the thickness of that atmosphere as equivalent to like a layer of varnish on a globe. It's very thin. And what we're doing as we heat up our planet, we're trapping solar radiation from the sun that has kept our planet what we call the Goldilocks planet, really the just right planet, at about 59 degrees Fahrenheit since the last ice age. And that's allowed us to evolve, all the species on the planet to evolve, and we are, just right. But what we're doing when we are pumping human-created greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, right, ones that aren't coming from our planet, and are setting our planet out of balance, is that we're causing that atmosphere to thicken, and we're trapping more and more of that solar radiation, and it heats up our planet. So that's, those are those 5 sentences, right? That's what climate scientists agree. That's happening. We know it's happening. We know it's happening because of what we're putting into the atmosphere, human-created greenhouse gases that come primarily from oil, coal, and gas. They also come from the way that we farm, and many of the things we do, which we didn't realize, when we started doing them, really aren't healthy for our planet, and we've put our planet out of balance. So, back to my book and my lessons when I talk to parents, maybe these are some things that your parents taught you, nothing to do with the climate crisis, right? Just some really basic important things about being good humans is that we should tell the truth, that actions speak louder than words, and not to be afraid. And when it comes to the climate crisis, that gets complicated and it gets hard. Telling the truth, right? We hear a lot of companies, a lot of governments, a lot of organizations that like to talk the talk, right? They recognize the climate crisis is real. It's recognized that we're causing it to happen. But then when it comes to taking urgent action, because it requires urgent action, we aren't moving in that same direction. And this is a quote from the Secretary General, just from a few weeks ago, from that 3rd installment of the 6th assessment of the IPCC report. And he's telling world leaders, he's telling CEOs of big companies, he's telling all of us those empty promises, that's not going to cut it. That isn't okay, because we are dealing with a situation that we have to address now, while scientists tell us we still have time. And who's really helping raise the alarm are young people like you all over the world that have said, no way, this is an intergenerational justice issue, and my future is being messed up because of what you're doing now, and you need to take responsibility. And I know that there are those adults that kind of like to put it back on your shoulders and say, well, it's your problem, so you fix it. That is not okay, and that's not right. It has to be something that we work on intergenerationally, together, of all ages. But having worked on this issue since the early 90s, and there have been young people that have been raising their voices for a really long time, I have to say that in the last few years, I feel like young people's voices are being heard and listened to in a much more direct and stronger way. I'm seeing young people, again, in high school, in college, in middle school, that are being invited to tables with CEOs, with governors, with state officials, with national leaders, and they aren't just there to say, here's a seat of the youth person at the table. They're actually being listened to, because clearly we need new ideas. We need different ideas. We need ideas to come from somewhere else. And we need to address what we've done to the planet, and to recognize that just because we can't see greenhouse gas emissions, we're putting more than 162 million tons into the atmosphere every single day. And we're treating our atmosphere like an open sewer. We're causing it to change, and that's changing everything on our planet. And again, there are many ways that we're contributing to greenhouse gases, human-created, into the atmosphere. You hear a lot about fossil fuels, because we can really measure and see the footprint of human-created fossil fuels and see the damage that it's doing and how we're just increasing. So that what the IPCC report, back to that report I talked about in the beginning, it says we have to have this transition now. We have to reach a point within this decade where our greenhouse gas emissions start to go down, and then the planet can find our way to be back in balance. We continue to see year after year that we're heating up our planet. And this again, right, this is the science. Science, it's physics. It's not politics, it's reality, it's what's happening. And we need to recognize that, and then we need to imagine the future that we want to see, and then we can start figuring out how we can get there, because again, we don't have to invent new things. The transition to renewable energy has already started. The biggest increase in investment in the United States for energy sources has been renewables, and I think half of that has been, we're going to look at the statistic, but it's been solar panels. We are moving in that direction. You tend to hear about the gloom and the doom, because it makes for good news, right? Storms, fires, floods. But in fact, the solutions are out there and happening, and people are working at them every single day. So, when coming to telling the truth, we recognize what's happening. When you're talking to younger sisters, brothers, cousins, you want to be age appropriate, right? Maybe you're not going to give them all the stats that you get in science class, or that you've read about, or that you've seen in the IPCC report, but we're going to be honest, and we're going to look at, because sometimes it feels like, what can I do, right? Can I make a difference? Who am I? I'm in 10th grade. There's so much that you can do and be heard and be seen, and I'm telling you that people like to have young people at the table. They want to listen to you. They want to hear from you, those politicians, those business leaders. And so your voice may matter a lot more than mine does in many of those circles, or your teachers, or your parents. So you have a lot to say, and you should be heard. And it still is, though, we need systems change for sure. So let's not pretend that we don't need that transition to happen quickly, but everything that you can do, all the actions that are happening here at your school, to really show other districts around the state what can happen, from having your waste-free lunches to having climate education put into all cross-curricular, to learning about climate in art class and in drama and in social studies. Those are all critical things that we're not doing everywhere, and that we can. So as we give people agency, as we give people the ability to take action, we really move things forward. So this concern that we're running out of time, we have to just get beyond that. We have to move forward and recognize there's many things that we can do, and young people all over the world are doing that. So it's not just here, and I want to show you, again, just a few slides from people that are your age, that are just coming together to raise attention, to demand that they're heard, and to demand that those people in power make those changes, that they don't just, as the Secretary General just reminded us, talk the talk, that they actually walk that walk. And it's been hard with COVID, right? We just sort of began in a very big way with global climate strikes, with marches, with youth being in the streets and being out in the schoolyard or being in your neighborhood. And that's starting again. And that isn't for everybody either. That's one way of having your voices heard. There's meetings, formal meetings with officials. I know that your school has organized that to present a climate plan and a program, and I understand it was addressed and heard, and that there, hopefully there'll be changes that come from that. So we need that intergenerational discussion, allyship in how we move forward, and it's critical that you, again, don't feel like it's all on your shoulders, that it's a shared responsibility for everyone, and it's an exciting one in some ways, right? When has our species had this opportunity, actually, to be at the cusp of this great transition that we're having now? We have to change. We are changing. And you're just at that point where you're, thinking about maybe what you're going to do when you get out of high school, or, don't rush it. It goes super fast. But we can all be part of that solution, whatever it is that you do, in helping to address and slow down the climate crisis. So these are some pictures from the Climate March in 2014. I don't know if any of you were in New York City. This was when we brought 400,000 people into the streets. Anybody there? Was anybody there? Or in your community? You were younger? Okay. But why was that important at that moment? That was the year before the Paris Climate Agreement, which got a lot of press, good and bad, but it was when the first time in a long time, since the early 90s, that the world came together and said, hey, we recognize this is really serious, and every country is coming with their own country plan on what they're going to do to keep global temperatures below 2 degree rise and try to cap it at a 1.5 degree rise. And we're seeing, right, this is since the Industrial Revolution, we're at a 1.2 degree rise in temperature. Doesn't sound like much, right? But what's 1.2, 1.3? We're seeing the impacts of the climate crisis in a really big way. And scientists tell us that every 1/10 of a degree matters. So it really matters what we do, and we are at that moment where we can do all these things now, and there are many opportunities. So again, it's looking at where you're going through the lens of the climate crisis and finding your superpower, finding a way to put it to use. So back to those 3 ideas, right? Telling the truth, actions speak louder than words. I would say the first thing, again, to do is to remember to take care of yourself. I don't know how many of you sometimes get really sad about what's happening. Climate crisis, politically, COVID, it's a lot, right? It's a lot of things that are happening to you, to all of us. And it's those, to express your feelings are really important. That's normal. There's nothing wrong about that we should feel concerned and sad. And then we have to find a way to move through that grief and that sadness and build hope and build resolve and move forward, because we should all, that's the exciting next step, because there's a place for all of us. And you all, as I said, can be trusted messengers. You can be those young people that people listen to. This is a quote from that I have in my book, and it's from OPEC, so from the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. And this was the head of OPEC saying they're hearing from their kids. They're hearing, their kids are asking them, what are they doing about the climate crisis? So young people have a lot of power, and you never know who it is that you speak to that then somebody else in your life speaks to, and you might not know the impact of it, but we all can create change. And for me, my work at the United Nations really helped me see that depending where you take it and how you take it, things can go really far, really fast, and you just had that little part of it, and you moved it farther. As I said to you, I think it's really incredible and wonderful that you're learning about the climate crisis in your own here in this district. It isn't happening everywhere. I'm part of a group that works with New York City public school teachers. We did a survey last fall, and only 52% of teachers say they're teaching about climate, and in fact, that's only 1 to 2 hours a year. So, and why is that? It's because they don't feel that they're trained, that they have the correct information or the curriculum. So the important work that you're doing to help bring that into the classroom, that your teachers, that your superintendent, that your principal is doing, are really critical. And just quickly, this is a study that a friend of mine did. He works in California, and they did this peer-reviewed study, came out in February 2020, and they looked at college students who'd taken one class in their freshman year on sustainability or climate. And then they interviewed them 5 years later, and they looked at how their actions, if they were taking public transportation more, if they had a vehicle, it was electric or hybrid. They were doing more to reduce their energy in their classrooms, in their homes. And if we could scale that, this study said if you could scale education as the same way we're reducing our greenhouse gases, it would be huge. It would be up there with switching to renewable energy. So education is truly key and really, really important. I know that in 2 minutes, the bell's going to ring, and your colleagues that are watching are going to have to go to their next classroom. So I'm going to go through the rest of the slides in the next 2 minutes. And then those of us here, we're going to have some time to, I hope you have some questions, or I'll just fill in with what we left out. But those were those three sayings, those three important points: telling the truth, actions speak louder than words, and don't be afraid. I get asked often by parents, by people that I speak with through Climate Mama, I'm so busy, I can't do everything. Give me 3 things that I can do. And as I said before, there's not 3 things, there are a plethora. Everything we do can make a difference. But if there are 3 things, I would ask and remind you that we need to work on our democracy in this country. So however you can be involved in that is really important, because it is very fragile, and we need to protect that and be part of it. Follow up and be prepared when you support something, and plant seeds and watch them grow. I was speaking to a 2nd grade teacher yesterday evening, and she told me how incredible it was to go into their community garden and watch her 2nd graders plant seeds and watch something grow. And I don't know if you have a garden at home or have ever done anything like that, but both literally and figuratively, planting these seeds about what we need to do is critically important. So I'd like to say bye and thank you to everyone who's been watching from their classrooms. And for those of you here, maybe we'll just give it a minute before we continue while those people leave. So I'll stop talking for a minute. You can have a stretch. It's really special that you can do that. Should I call them back? Okay.
I'm going to do Q&A.
Yeah.
Or you can wrap up. Q&A.
An International Youth Summit last week, and we had people from all over the world that tuned in. They were many college students, younger people, I think 19 to 25. There were some high school students, but the call to action at the end of it, of this International Youth Conference, was these 3 points. So tell the truth, the importance of education, both formal and informal, so also outside of the classroom, and that we need to have youth at the table always. So again, I think your voices being heard, a representative from youth that is there, is really critical and important. This next slide's a little hard to read, but I wanted to just bring you these 5 things that were shared by some colleagues of mine for Earth Day. This was out of an organization called CLEO in Florida. And there are so many things that are happening, so many reasons to hope, so many reasons to see what's happening. But, you know, there's this terrible war that's happening in Europe now, and we hear a lot of terrible things coming out of that. And there also is all this pressure around oil and gas, and there's a real recognition and understanding how addicted all of us are, right, to those energy sources. And we've really seen that come to the forefront because of the gas that is provided by Russia to the rest of Europe. And so Germany, which gets a lot of its gas and oil from Russia, has jumped its commitment to move to renewables. And it's not easy to do that. It's a hardship for people that live there. Not only gas at the pump that is that much more expensive, but heating your home, heating your business. So they are bringing forward their climate plan by 15 years. And again, that will be something to watch and see how it happens. I mentioned this second one earlier. Solar power is accounting for nearly half of all new United States electric generation this year. And 95% of the new generation is coming from renewables. This is a new generation. We're moving into an EV future, right, and an EV now. Electric vehicles, you aren't going to be able to buy a gas-powered vehicle by 2035, and that's happening really quickly. We hear a lot about, China, coal-fired power plants. China, this year, is planning more solar and wind than the rest of the world combined did in 2020. So it's huge, the changes that are happening, the transitions that are happening so very quickly. And people are recognizing that. Again, back to that Yale Climate Communications, whatever your party, whatever your politics, people understand and are moving towards. 64% of Americans say they understand and are more convinced that the climate crisis is bad and it's harming us and we need to do something about it. So there are many reasons to be hopeful, to be positive. New jobs in renewables, new jobs in this green future. There are incredible and exciting things that are happening. There's a lot of disturbing events. Our planet is screaming at us, right? She's saying, get with the program or get out, because you've set me out of balance, and I am going to show you in many, many ways what that means. And we're seeing that in the drought in the Southwest. We're seeing that in forest fires. We're seeing that in rain and strong storms that we're experiencing here. And it's not just happening over there, the climate crisis, wherever over there ever was. It's happening to us and to people we know and people we love. And that is the opportunity and the sign that it's time to do something. So I'd love to hear if you have any questions and try to answer them. Feel free just to raise your hand, and then, yeah, in the back. Right, such a good question, and I had 20 minutes or so I didn't get into that. But the question was, what are the steps to get rid of factory farming? And the problems associated with big agriculture, because that is also a huge, I mean, it's wrong on so many levels, but a big source of greenhouse gas emissions as well. And I think that is being much more recognized. What can we do as individuals around that? Support your local farmer. We, try not to buy things from those kind of the places where we're getting, the eggs, the milk, those things that are being provided by those factory farms, and take action in terms of working with organizations. It's always hard to do it by ourselves, right? But there are so many groups that are working on all of these different areas where you'll find other passionate people that are concerned about big agriculture, that are concerned about factory farming, and there you'll find opportunities to talk to legislative officials, to create, to work on plans and actions to address those. So seek those out. I'm happy to share ideas with your teachers here as well, but it won't be hard to find those organizations that are doing really positive things to try to work to stop what's happening with big ag. There's one area that's actually a little, worrisome now, that as we move away from fossil fuels, some of those big ag places that are producing all of these methane emissions are looking to say, well, we're going to cap it. We can cap that methane emission, and we can put it in pipes, and we can use that as gas. And then you constantly have to have a feed for it, right? You need to more and more. And so we also don't want to encourage that. And so there's people working to identify those problems and help stop them. Other questions? Yeah. Yes. Well, we get most of, where our, yeah, so the question was, is it, fair that America needs to stop and move into renewable energy and stop producing fossil fuels. We still produce a huge amount of fossil fuels in America. In fact, we're the largest producer now of anywhere, but we get a lot of our oil from Canada, most of it from Canada, not from the Middle East. We get some, and oil and gas are commodities that are traded on the international market. Should we, think about that, where we get our oil from, is kind of the question, at the root of the question. Right. So, is it fair that we're working towards renewable energy and everybody else is using fossil fuels around the world? Yeah. Well, the whole world has to move in that direction. And I think that recognition is there. And many countries are far ahead of where we are with renewable energy. So we have some catching up to do with China, with the way that India is moving forward faster on solar. Some of those countries that we blame, as the sources of fossil fuels are moving farther and faster because renewables are coming in cheaper than fossil fuels. Without the huge subsidies that we give to fossil fuels, we provide huge amounts of subsidies in our country to mine fossil fuels, to produce and get them to market. And so if we could level the playing field, I think we'd move even that much faster. So it's a really good question, and I think we need to move farther, faster, and other countries are doing it now too. The transition is inevitable, it's happening. And fossil fuel companies see that too. They're trying to move into plastics, right? Plastics are made from fossil fuels. They're trying to find ways to get their product to market. And we need to also hold them accountable and say, you know what? You've known for a long time that the burning of fossil fuels is going to change our planet's temperature and put us into this situation we're in now. We can look back into the 60s, early 60s, reports from fossil fuel companies, and that information is out there, available. There's many communities and states that are beginning to sue fossil fuel companies for hiding that information. So we just need to call them out, and they need to be held accountable, and then we need that transition to happen quickly. So, yeah, in the back there? Yep. Oh, do we have time? Okay.
My question is similar to his, but like, what if we got like Elon Musk and his boys to like get all the trash and like load it on the rocket ships and like send it into space, like the stuff we can't burn and stuff, like just put it into space?
Well, you know, I think when I talk to young kids, and they're really clear, you know, much more direct one way or another. If you make a mess, you should clean it up. You have to clean it up, whoever makes that mess. And we can't send it to outer space, in my opinion, nor should we be allowing all these greenhouse gases to be spewed into the atmosphere. I think if we paint, you know, if they were pink or purple or blue, we would see them and we wouldn't allow it. And I don't think we should be, you know, we can get Elon Musk and his boys to figure out solutions to the climate crisis, and they're doing that with battery storage and, you know, electric vehicles and many things. But sending our trash to space, I don't think that's a good idea. Other questions? Yeah, in the middle? Yes?
Like widely invested into now.
Start again.
Why is nuclear energy not being invested into more than other like renewable energy sources?
Yeah, a good question. And it's an important one, and we should nuclear energy isn't renewable, but it doesn't produce greenhouse gases, right? And we in the U.S. have gone, since we had an accident back in the 70s with nuclear energy, we haven't advanced our nuclear power generation and building. And so to get a nuclear power plant approved and built in the United States is really complicated and difficult. There's one in Georgia that's being built. Our nuclear power here in New Jersey, the plants are old, they need to be, you know, they're gone past their time. But there are other countries that are using other generations of nuclear power that are less dangerous in many ways. It's a very fraught energy from people feel really strongly one way or another, but I would say nuclear power should absolutely be on the table. But the way we've been doing it here in this country isn't, we don't have that technology, the ability. Doesn't mean we can't get it, but the way we were doing it, you know, there's many other generations of nuclear, but it's a really important question. Yeah. Over, yeah.
So I know like economic greed plays like a large role in the fact that like so many major companies refuse to stop using like carbon emissions. What's the best way to reduce that? Because a lot of them are older, so they won't have to deal with the consequences of climate change. So how can we as kids help prevent economic greed?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that for many companies that are doing, that are producing, you know, greenhouse gas emissions or producing products or using things indiscriminately, I think there's much more role we can play both on a legislative basis. They have to follow the rules. There are a lot of rules out there, especially in our country, about what you can pollute and what you can't pollute. I don't think we're enforcing them well. And we as consumers, you know, if that's a company that's doing that, get together, get people, you know, Rainforest Action Network, there's other organizations that are really good at getting the finger pointed at those companies that are doing those, you know, egregious things. We have a campaign that's been running in London, England, where we've targeted Lloyd's of London. Lloyd's of London is a big insurance company, and they insure a lot of fossil fuel projects all over the world. And we have a group of moms and little kids that have been showing up outside of Lloyd's of London. Over the Christmas, one of our moms, who's an artist, created this beautiful Advent calendar, and we gave it to the head of Lloyd's of London. He's a father, he has 5 kids, and he took that advent calendar, he put it on display in Lloyd's. He's engaged with us. These parents are meeting with him, I think, in 2 weeks. He's actually got a meeting. And I think we can target those kind of folks that have really powerful positions in creative ways and make them think about what they're doing. And we need some of those big leaders, those big companies to be the industry leaders to change how things have been done. And I think we can do that. Yeah. Do we have one more question? Or one more? Yeah? Okay, there was somebody here in the front? Yeah?
Thank you. How do you feel about the acquisition of precious resources such as cobalt used in electric vehicles or in microchips for a lot of technology powering the green revolution in technology being exploited by other countries, particularly in the DRC and Africa? How do you think we should regulate that?
I think we need to get better at recycling and spending time and more money. I think we're seeing that from companies too. We need to create more of a circular economy as it relates to precious metals and all of those things. It's a similar thing, right? We just think there's an infinite amount, whether it's oil from the ground, gas, we've gone into fracking, cobalt, the damage we're doing. So I think there's much more that can be done from that perspective. That's a good question, too. They've been great questions. Do we want to do the survey now, or do we have time? Yes? Shall I turn it over to you? Okay.
Do this. All right, so folks, thank you for being such an awesome audience. Thank you, Ms. Sugarman. Can we give her a round of applause?